Hi everybody, my name is Brian Beneduce and welcome to Facebook Live. This is my second edition, if you will. And I want to thank everybody for, first of all, your continued support. I'm encouraged to keep adding content because I'm inspired by the amount of the incredible questions I'm getting, the comments and questions I'm getting. It's important because I need to know that it's working, and it surely is, because again, the shares and the not just surface questions, but you want to know about my company and about my sales, and I'm going to go over that in a little while because it's important for you to know what I have in store. And I'm excited about it. So as promised, what I'd like to do is I'm going to give you the abridged version of my Scared Strong talk, which is a 55-minute presentation. And this is the abridged version. It's about 19-20 minutes if I do it correctly, which hopefully I will. So without further ado, here we go. I want to tell you about the most beautiful toilet I ever saw. It was about this high, and the seat was a little small. But I should back up. What made this toilet so beautiful was the fact it was on a brand new yacht named Jenny Girl. My wife was laughing with our friends while our kids swam in the water. I had built a company from nothing to be one of the most successful plastic bottle companies in the country. My family was happy and healthy. We had this amazing boat to cruise around on. This was success. But then I remembered another toilet, 30 years ago. My company was about 6 months old, and in the morning I was flying to Phoenix to try and get one of the biggest distributors in the country to buy from me. Whether they said yes or no would decide whether we made it through the next couple of years comfortably or were struggling to stay in business. I should have been getting a good night's sleep. Truthfully, I just knew more about the product than almost any other salesman in the country. But instead, I was sitting by the toilet crying because to get to Phoenix, I had to get on a plane and park in a garage and drive through the Callahan Tunnel. I didn't know if I could do any of that. At dawn, I washed my face and put on my suit and a fake smile, and I kissed my wife, who was oblivious to my night of torment. No way I would show weakness, especially in front of my wife. I made it through the tunnel and then prayed to God I would find a spot on the first floor of that parking garage. Please don't make me go up there. No way I'm taking an elevator. The fourth floor. So once I parked, I had to walk down the stairs, and there was a steel door on every floor, including the one at the bottom. What if it was locked? What if I got stuck in there? So I took some papers from my briefcase and I folded them into little wedges. And on every floor on the way down, I put one in the door, just in case. I got on the plane. It didn't crash. It landed. Some people hugged their grandparents. Some kissed their husbands. I went off and closed a $12 million deal. My name is Brian Beneduce, and I do suffer from acute anxiety. I also built an incredibly successful packaging company. The anxiety made it a lot harder, but it also taught me some things that I know contributed to my success. So my father started a blow molding company, and in high school, I helped out a little bit. Now, working full-time, I study blueprints, electrical schematics, viscosity tables. I learned how each machine worked, and more importantly, how to fix them when they broke. The most important thing was to have a 3/8 wrench. This wrench could precisely set the thickness of the finished product, which is the key to a great plastic bottle. My father's lead mechanic, Dave, knew every step of the process, and he was my boss. So one day he was struggling with tooling on a machine that controls the wall thickness. I asked if he needed some help. He shrugged and stepped aside. The bolts were cranked down too tight, and without thinking, I said, "My boss, you can't force it." I took out my 3/8 wrench and I backed off the torque, and the material began to flow. I was at the plant all the time, and I got to know all the people who worked for my dad, including the salesman, especially John. John drove a Porsche. He wore sharp Italian suits, and he always knew what time it was because he was checking his Rolex. He was like my working American dream, and he went out into the world and talked to total strangers and got them to buy our bottles. I was in awe because the only place I was comfortable was in the back with my 3/8 wrench. It's taken a long time to realize it, but John was pivotal to my success. You see, we had a board that tracked new orders, usually around 6 weeks out, but one day I walked in and saw 2 weeks up there. We found out John had left and started his own company in direct competition with us. Not only that, he's been routing all new orders to his company. John had clearly lost his mind, and I thought maybe he should lose his head too. My dad must have seen it on my face, because when I went to peel out of the parking lot, he was standing right in front of my truck, refusing to move till I did something, promised not to do anything stupid. I was furious with John for betraying us, also for putting me in an impossible position. Without John, I couldn't stay in the back with the machines. My dad had to run the business. I'd have to pick up the slack. I knew how to fix machines, but to sell, I was going to have to fix myself. So I put on a suit and took some samples to a soap manufacturer about 2 miles away. No appointment, I just went. I always found Rocky inspiring, and I had a cassette of the movie's music in my truck. I kept playing the theme song over and over, trying to armor myself against the beast in my head to talk to people I never met. The receptionist led me to a cubicle in the center of everything, where everybody could see me. A man stood up, shook my hand. I put my case down and I opened it. I have no idea what I said to this guy, because as I turned to grab a sample, my foot caught in his telephone cord. That came flying off his desk, along with his computer, knocking his coffee into my sample case, samples rolling everywhere. He was just like, "Go, get the hell out of here. Can I sell?" Clearly not. A few months later, my dad asked me and my brother to dinner, just the three of us. He told us he was folding the business. I was shocked. Now what? I realized that John would have hired me in a heartbeat, but I'd rot in hell before I go work for him. So, if I wanted to survive, I was going to have to sell. I should pause for a moment, because my life wasn't all work. There was this girl. Her name was Roberta. But since the 10th grade, I had known her as Robbie. When I'd see her kissing her boyfriend, I'd wink at her. She couldn't stand me, hated me, arrogant jock, ay. So one night we're at a party, she's there, and the boyfriend wasn't. And we started talking. I asked her out on a double date. We broke up and got back together a few times. We thought maybe we could live without each other. Wrong. So I was a couple beers in by the time my groomsmen showed up. I try not to think about standing in front of the church, all those eyes on me, watching me hyperventilate or pass out. The scenarios grew and branched in my mind. I call that my anxiety tree. I kept celebrating or medicating until it was time for the ceremony. But that wasn't the only thing scaring me. It was the honeymoon. What is there to be scared of on a honeymoon? A trip. We settled into our seats on the airplane. My beautiful bride fell asleep. As soon as they closed the door, the fear started up. I was petrified, afraid of what I might do because of this beast. So I tucked my hands under the seatbelt to the wrist, and I leaned forward to lock them down. Then I ordered some drinks. I unbuttoned my collar and I gulped air. All around me, people were reading magazines and napped and did crossword puzzles. I could not understand how they just sat there, so calm. We got to Antigua, I went straight to the bar. Now, if you're battling agoraphobia or extreme anxiety, alcohol does help for a while. But when it wears off, the fear comes back much worse. So that night, Robbie fell asleep and I stayed awake. I stayed awake on a continuous verge of panic. There was no TV, so I turned on the radio. But in the middle of the night, they just read the newspaper. They were going through the death notices. So I spent the whole night reading the same couple magazines over and over. At dawn, slipping into bed, lying to my wife I slept fine. And that's how I spent my honeymoon. I kept all this from Robbie for years, and now that she knows what I was going through, it's hard for her to hear. So she generally doesn't come to these talks. There are too many moments in our life where I only half lived. Knowing only plastics, I started my own company, Ocean State Packaging. Every day, I reported to work in our spare bedroom, and I made calls. One day, in the middle of the summer, I got an appointment in Secaucus, New Jersey. As you can imagine, one of the many things that scare me the most are bridges, and there are a lot of them between Rhode Island and Secaucus. So I was just west of New York when I saw bright red lights, traffic on a bridge. I cranked the AC, and I tried to keep calm as my standard Toyota pickup inched up the bridge. Near the top, the old pickup started to rattle, and it died. I pulled over and got out, and in my dress shoes, ran like hell. I'm often afraid people are looking at me when they're really not. But one guy who was definitely looking was a state trooper at the bottom of the bridge. He put on the lights and waved me over. Not a chance, pal. He came after me with his hand on his gun. Sir, are you all right? My truck broke down. It broke down? Yeah, like that explained everything. He offered me a ride, called a tow. I got in his car. He took me back to my truck. I watched him leave. As soon as he left, I took off running the other way. 2 minutes later, blue lights. Broke down? Yeah. That's it? Yeah. Hop in, I'll call you a tow. But this time I said, no way. Cop says, what? I told him I'd get in the car, but I'm not going back to my truck. He said if I stayed in the cruiser, he'd have to take me down to the station, which meant he'd have to arrest me. So I did the logical thing. I got in and buckled up. Around this time, Robbie and I were blessed with two great kids, my son Mike and my daughter Jennifer. I wanted to take him to Disney. At Epcot Center, we lined up to go into that big silver globe. I'm reading the sign. If you have claustrophobia, a heart condition, or any other it should have just said, Brian, you have no business being on this ride. I got in the car first to be on the end to protect her. We put the kids in the middle, and my wife sat in the other end. I buckled the strap, and my throat got tight. The attendant pushed a button, and the ride started going up. My kids were looking all around in wonder, but I was fighting to keep myself together. Even telling you this now makes me ashamed, but I unbuckled and I climbed over my wife and children to get off the ride. Then I grabbed the end of the train so they couldn't take my family away. They stopped the whole ride. Fun fact, Disney has cops. They took me into a tiny interrogation room. It is a small world after all. Some protect her. Remember that time we went to Disney and Dad got arrested? People ask how my wife didn't know I was suffering, but I sold her too. When we had to go to a party, I'd get a stomachache or a headache or the actual flu. As a coach, instead of making a speech at the end of the season, I let the team captains do it. People thought I was so gracious, but Robbie noticed how often I was sick. So one night I'm packing for a trip, and our dog was sniffing my briefcase. Would you get that dog out of here? Robbie looked at me. Brian, what's wrong? Nothing. I just got to pack. I have 6 visits, Brian. Look, if I don't talk to these guys, somebody else will. Brian, what? You're sick all the time. You're not sleeping. Business is fine. Don't force it. So one night I fell asleep on the couch and I woke up to an infomercial on TV. It was Lucinda Bassett's commercial for the Midwest Center for Stress and Anxiety. And she was describing every bad feeling, every crazy thought, every random fear I'd ever felt. How could she know? It turns out these aren't just feelings. They're part of a condition, a mental disorder. It's not that I'm weak or crazy. I just have anxiety and panic. And in my severe case, agoraphobia. As soon as Robbie woke up, I told her what I had learned. Brian, she said, this explains so much, and gave me a hug. Learning that I had a mental disorder and having the courage to tell my wife was the first and most important steps in my healing. The other piece is developing tools to manage it. As a mechanic, I know there are a million tools, and you have to find the right one for you. For some people, it's meditation. For others, it's exercise or medication. I've always exercised a lot, but I didn't personally want to rely on medication. So what was going to be my 3/8 wrench? I have a few, and Act As If is one. Act As If is basically the process of recognizing that agoraphobia attacks have happened to me many, many times, and not a single one has ever killed me, which means the next one won't kill me either. It's about completely changing your mindset to acting as if I'm okay, and then accepting that I actually am. These simple yet effective tools took a long time to master, but they work. And I can tell you when I realized that I completely trusting myself. Robbie and I had taken the kids to Puerto Rico. The sun was going down and the fear started up. And I was wondered if I'd be up all night reading magazines like on my honeymoon. But this time I knew what it was. It was a flare-up, like a rash. So instead of trying to fight it, I just let my armor drop away. Do not fight it. And the fear went with it. I walked to the pool and I jumped in. I was having fearful thoughts, but not feelings. I was on a beautiful island on a beautiful evening, playing with my kids in the pool. And I wasn't scared. I was happy. Circling back, John's company took off like a rocket because of all the accounts he had taken. But the way he did it meant people didn't really trust him, and he went bankrupt. After my dad's company folded, he ran a few other businesses, and then eventually retired to a condo in Florida. And I grew my business to be one of the most successful plastic bottle companies in the country, and in the process created opportunities for many people. And that would be the end of the story, except one night, a dear friend told me about how his wife was in crisis. Everything he described sounded so familiar that I opened up about my anxiety in a way I've never done that before. His face said it all, shocked and stunned. Afterward, he said, Brian, people need to hear this. You have to write an effing book. Write a book? I didn't even go to college. But he was insistent. So I tried one chapter titled The Wedding. And if my wife said okay, then I would. When Robbie finished, she was in tears. She said it wasn't a choice. There are people out there who need to know they're suffering from this condition, but that they can manage it. If anything, it may teach them to be the toughest, most tenacious people there are, like you. So I've written a couple of books and given God knows how many speeches, but that doesn't mean I've beaten it. This afternoon, I knew I'd come here and talk to all of you. What if I throw up, or have a heart attack, or just run off the stage? What would you think of me? But then I remembered to drop my armor. Yeah, what if those things happen? That would be horrible. But they've never happened at any speech I ever gave before, and they won't now. And then I reminded myself that you came here to hear a successful businessman talk about how he withstood agoraphobia and extreme panic, and even used it to help him develop inner strength to build a great business. Act as if I'm comfortable up here, not nervous, but excited, because all those things are true. And lastly, I paid attention to the words in my head. If you don't remember anything else I've said, I want you to remember this. You are amazing, and you are special, and you matter. And I wouldn't let anyone speak badly to you, because you deserve to be spoken to truthfully and with kindness. And do you know who's most likely to speak to you with disdain or judgment or contempt? Well, if you suffer from anxiety, you already know that answer. You are. And so this is what I want you to remember. Listen to the words in your head. Make sure that they are the kind of words you will let somebody say to your daughter or your son, your brother or your sister, or your parents, make sure they are true, but that they are kind and they respect the greatness within you and the strength that you show every day by just being you. So that is the abridged version of my 55-minute talk titled Scared Strong. And I've got a funny little story to go along with that. Again, I'm going to try and keep these to 30 minutes or less. In February, I gave the presentation. We called it Fear is Fortune, actually. And it was the very first 55-minute talk that I gave. And it was at Dean College. And I have to tell you, I'm 59 years old. That could be one of the top 3 things I've ever done in my life. Certainly the number one as far as public speaking is concerned. As many of you know who follow me and ask me questions, my last irrational fear, and I used to have quite a few of them, is speaking in public. Excuse me. Well, this was in February, and it was called the Leadership in Action Series. Now, people that have spoken before me were the president of Nike, director of Microsoft, Robert Kraft, and me. So you can imagine that somebody that suffers from agoraphobia, and I went looking and I looked for information, and I'm looking at the crowd of people that were going to be there. Hundreds and hundreds of people. Dr. Paul Rooney was the president. Dr. Shaw, who was he was in charge of actually the speaking of the Leadership in Action series. So we were communicating with him. And when I saw them come in, I don't want to use the word overwhelmed, but there's a blog on my website, and it's called Empty Toolbox, because I used every single tool that I had, act as if, drop your armor, bad words, good words, rubber band effect, everything. And I was trying to stay excited because this was an hour speech with me alone on a stage with all these people. And if you follow Seinfeld, these people had suits, Jerry. But there were sports teams there. There were hundreds of people there. The whole loft was full. And the amazing thing was, none of them were on their phones for the full 55 minutes, including the Q&A session. And that was proven by our talk afterwards. When I spoke, we had dinner at the president's house. They were amazed that nobody went on their phones, which was very inspiring for me. In addition to that, they're using my book, Anxiety Warrior, in the curriculum. And that's amazing. And once this COVID-19 and we can get out this pandemic, we get rid of it. And again, hopefully we're on the back 9 of this thing. We can get back together and we can get back into, I can get back into that audience because I want to get back there and talk again. I loved it there. That was a great venue. But what I was getting at was somebody asked, what's my favorite book behind me? So we're at dinner, and the academic community is one where I'm a little intimidated. I did not go to college. So unless you say anti-disestablishmentarianism, that's the only long word I've ever known. I don't use very big words. I'm a simple kind of guy. And so, like I said, these are all the heads of certain departments and so on and so forth. They were wonderful. They were marvelous. They were very down-to-earth people. But we started talking about books. I'm an avid reader now. But we started talking, and I happened to talk about the very first book I ever read. I was a junior in high school, and it was called Tom Seaver, My Life. Well, you think my face is red? You should see my wife sitting next to me. She's sitting next to me. She whispers in my ear. She goes, "That's what you had to tell him?" It was perfect because Dr. Shaw loves baseball. I'm from Jersey. I used to be a Met fan. I'm a Red Sox fan now. But we talked about the 69 Mets, the Miracle Mets, Tommy Agee, Ed Kranepool, Cleon Jones, and we talked baseball for a half hour. It was fantastic. But I just thought it was great. But to answer the question that was asked of me, it's 100%, all the biographies, all the Nelson DeMel's, all those books. Number one is Lucinda Bassett's book on panic and anxiety. And it leads me back to the trip to Puerto Rico. because I bought the book, took it with me, and I literally read it cover to cover 5 times. I highlighted things, and all it did was prove to myself that I would be fine. And then I started to implement my own tools that worked for me. And that's the first vacation that I've ever extended. Usually I cut them short and I made excuses because I couldn't handle it anymore. Emotionally, I couldn't handle the beast pounding me every night with my kids, prior to kids, anything. So it was my very first extended vacation. I'm going to back up one more time because I want to tell you something else that happened. And this has to do with my wife. Right before I went on stage, you know how much I love Rocky? I was nervous, and she could tell. And she looked at me and went, "Look at your phone." So I looked at my phone for the last time, and it had a picture of Adrian telling Rocky, and it said, "Win." And I get choked up now thinking about it because that was awesome. And that did it. I went up on stage and I killed it. So that was cool. But anyway, I put in my post that next week I'm going to be starting It Must Be Nice. That's what I'm titling it. And there's a reason for that. And I'll get into that not today, next week. And people have asked me, the most questions I've gotten are about my business, which I love. They want to know about sales, how I did it, how did I find the courage, the will, which tells me that there's a lot of fear out there. It doesn't necessarily have to be agoraphobic or agoraphobia, but there's a lot of fear out there. I, since last Tuesday, have gotten all my sheets, I'm pointing over there as a table, all my sheets together, and I've got detailed sales trips. And it goes into detail about from my home to the trip, to the destination, to maybe another destination, and all the feelings and all the things I was thinking in my head. And it's incredible. It really, really is incredible. It's could be a 5,000 page book. You got to figure 20 years of selling, dealing with this on hundreds and hundreds of sales calls. And I took the best ones I could find, and I'm hoping, and by the comments, it's working, that you continue to add content, you continue to share my story with as many people as you can, so hopefully it inspires people to get past whatever fear they may have, and put your life over mine and say, if you can do it, then I can too. But you really got to want to do it. You really got to want to do it. So thank you very much for joining me on this Tuesday. It feels like I did last Tuesday yesterday, but I will come back to you again. Check out our posts on Facebook. We do more Facebook than most anything else, like Twitter and Instagram, but Facebook's mostly what we do. Check out the website, brianbeneduce.com. There's some blogs up there. There's actually a COVID 23-minute segment, and that was produced by Serious Fun Productions. I need to put a shout out to them. Tricia Bradley, thank you very much. And so in any event, thank you very much. Have a great day, and please be safe. And I'll come to you next Tuesday. Thank you.